on behalf of Kenya Magistrates and Judges Association to join in this conversation. And just as Chair has mentioned, it can't have come at a better time than when our Kenyans are coming home for the long school holidays. We are also very grateful to the Kenya Cybersecurity and Forensics Association for the partnership that we have had, the several platforms that we have shared on conversations around cybersecurity. We've covered cybercrime. We've covered the issues around electronic evidence management, which is something that is also quite critical, even as we merge it with today's conversation on child online protection. Current trends on cybersecurity issues, among very many other issues that I think my colleagues would attest we have heavily weighed in and continue to influence our thoughts, our journey as all of us aim towards speeding the wheels of justice and improving access to justice. So we welcome you all on behalf of the President of the Kenya Magistrates and Judges Association to today's conversation. Very interesting. Thank you, Chair, for the panel that you have set up, experts indeed. And we look forward to a very interesting forum and to be able to just share and see what is it that we can do, even as we look beyond the Kenyans that we have here to a global aspect in respect of our children. Asante sana, and on behalf of KMJA, karibuni sana. Back to you, Chair.
Right away, we'll welcome our moderator to take us through today's session. Catherine, over to you.
Thank you so much, Chair, and welcome all to today's webinar. It is an interesting one for sure, and we have three able presenters. I will introduce them. We have Samuel, who is the founder and executive director for the African Institute for Children Studies. So Samuel, would you like to say hi to the participants before we move to the next person?
Thank you, Catherine. Samuel Munyuing, I saw you hesitated pronouncing the second one. I understand. Well, I work with African Institute for Children Studies, and we are a non-profit organization in the space of knowledge management on children, being able to provide evidence that influences policy and capacity building. We've worked a lot in the field on online safety, and also worked with the judiciary. We represent the civil society groups in the Task Force on Children Matters that is chaired by Honorable Lady Justice Martha Koome and convened by NCAJ. And through that, some of the contribution we've made recently is developing a juvenile justice information management system, which I think is very critical for improving access to justice in this time when courts have been have moved to being convened or information shared via even Facebook or online platform for holding court sessions. So briefly, I will say that, and I'll share maybe more when we go on to the conversation. Unless there's something you want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel, for the introduction, congratulations on the good work that you do. Our next presenter is Eveyln Kasina, and she is a founder and family IT consultant. Eveyln, say hi and a brief introduction.
Okay, thank you for that. My name is Eveyln Kasina. I am a family IT consultant and the founder of Eveyln, partly from my name. And ideally, what we do is to educate children on digital literacy and online safety. But as we have come to realize children do not live in a vacuum, we have extended the program to the stakeholders of the children, which include parents, guardians, educators, and government entities that are regulators. So among our partners, Communications Authority of Kenya, we've partnered with Google, we've partnered with Kenya Films Classification Board, all this to create awareness, but also equip those people who are in the radar and in the ecosystem of the child, for them to be able to create conducive environments for children. But specifically for children, what we do is to equip them with the knowledge and the skills so that they're able to live, to become digital citizens independent internet users who are able to make conscious and deliberate decisions about themselves in the online space. Thank you.
Thank you, Eveyln. Our next presenter is Honorable Mary Otindo, and she is the Principal Magistrate at Milimani Children's Court. Mary, would you like to give us a brief introduction and say hi to the participants?
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be part of this webinar this evening. I have nothing beyond what you have said. I am a principal magistrate currently serving at the Milimani Children's Court. I have served the children of this country for the last 9 years in the capacity of a magistrate. And basically what I do is just to adjudicate on issues, dispute relating to children who are in conflict and in contact with the law. And therefore, I'm here today to learn from my co-presenters as well as to get reviews as well as contributions in respect of today's topic. So I'm glad to be here this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, our presenters for the day. As we've all heard from the introduction, we look forward to a really engaging conversation. And talking of engagement, please, for the participants, we expect you to engage us as much as possible. The presenters are here to answer your questions, whatever you have. Please have them in the chat, and please note that we will answer the questions after the presentation. So you just note the question in the chat and it shall be answered. So the topic is really exciting and I know it will take time. So without much ado, let's go in. Samuel, take us through what you think about the challenge we are currently facing now that we have our kids back at home for a long time, and even some have been home doing online learning. So we've literally have had them longer than we always do. Samuel, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, it's good you mentioned, or rather you've used the phrase challenge. I think that's an important point to begin this conversation, that every time our children come home, many of us are wondering, now what trouble has happened here? When we are supposed to be smiling that they're back home. And of course, linking this to COVID and questions of online, I think that they quite tie in. Let me begin by just highlighting maybe what we already know or may not have been very conscious about. If you think about the spaces that children spend their time in, there are on average 3 spaces. So they'll spend time at school for the school going age, and that will often begin from about age 4. And if they're not in school, they'll be at home. So it should not be a panic that children are coming back home. That's where they belong if they're not in school. The other space they will be in, let me call it community. This is where they can play. So play spaces are very critical, and ability to interact, engage in community development. So those are the 3 spaces that children would usually traditionally be in. I think the pertinent question we are trying to answer in this forum is, how has COVID changed that? And especially in relation to online safety, has that changed? So if you think about the presence of children, while I've defined these 3 spaces, the big changer in the last almost 10 years has been the fact that we've introduced another space where children are in, and that space sort of combines all this, and that is the cyberspace. You know, usually it's very easy to tell your children when you walk in your village or within your neighborhood, usiende kwa hiyo, you know, this particular kichorochoro, because it's dangerous. And sometimes, unfortunately, we don't also tell the children the same thing about the online space, that kuna vichorochoro just the same way it is in our daily lives. And so if I point out some things that were pre-COVID, let me begin with the physical space. I think one of those things that Kenya is celebrated for is the fact that we've had a relatively higher proportion of children who are in school. While high, we still have about 2 out of every 10 children who usually doesn't complete primary education. You remember when you pick out the number who do KCPE, they're usually about 1 million. The ones who do KCSE are just about 500,000. So what happens to these ones? And these are people who are between 13 and 17 years. So that I don't think has changed. Unfortunately, perhaps we are too early into coming out of COVID to have statistics, but I think there's general, from many data sources, that we still have almost a similar number who did not report back to school after that. Yet we appreciate the importance of school as a space for protection. The thing that children then will do if they are not in school is likelihood to be working and doing something. And again, that exposes them to a lot of vulnerability. There are a number of reports of boys. Actually, boys seem to be equally, if not worse, affected with being engaged in other tasks because of the prolonged stay, especially those who are in secondary school. They went into boda boda, and it looks like there's more life in boda boda than going back to school. So again, I'm talking about 13, 17-year-olds who really should not be in that. Generally, we have a little more boys than girls, 11% girls, about 13% boys. And then the other thing that often linked with that space is sexual violence. Again, this has been high. About 50% of those who were interviewed during the Violence Against Children study that was done in 2019 reported having been sexually exploited, and girls too. And just the other day, we had a discussion with young people as we were doing a national adolescent health strategy. And they were saying girls are actually reporting a lot of cases of rape by other girls. And I don't know, it's good that we are here with people in the justice system. And so they were saying, as we do the adolescent health strategy, can we think about LGBTQI? You know that phrase that we use for lesbian, you know, boys or men who are in homosexuality, and transgender kind of sexual relations. So these are things that I think have been occurring. So if I try to answer briefly, so how has that changed? I will of course tie it in with what I mentioned about the spaces where children are. One, when COVID happened, those of us who are able to access a smartphone or internet, and our schools were able to organize, we moved a lot of our children into the online space to continue their learning. But we know also that a huge proportion of children, over 75%, could not access that. So I think one thing COVID exposed is just how different we are in terms of access to resources, access to rights, human rights and children rights in this country. And that is dangerous because it's likely to bring in conflict and tension in a society where the have and have nots are very huge. And that is why even if your child went to school pretty well and they're in the 844 system, they have to wait for the other ones anyway. So I think that divide became very obvious, which is a problem. That should have been the good part of online platform. The challenging part is, of course, that because they were doing nothing much, and yet access to internet in this country is one of the highest, about almost over 90% of the population can access internet, and over 74% can access a smartphone. Then it has become even a greater challenge because then a lot of us parents quickly gave out the gadgets to the children to keep them busy so that we can continue with what we want to do, with no ways of trying to supervise to support them to do the right things. So the exposure to child trafficking, and I've done a few papers that I've looked at how are the trends been. There are groups of young people who will still connect via that and be able to organize themselves. And if you have teenagers or young people around you, you know some of the things that happen. You know, I think this is the right group to talk about it, including sex parties, you know, a very serious thing that happen in, and sometimes including adults of much older ages and being exploited, or even just groups of young people going out for sex parties. So these kind of things have come out. They're, you know, wanting to post out things out there. And because people were rather idle, the more posts you had, you know, the more you are liked. We all know how this peer pressure is happening. And so these are things that I think have been made worse in the context of COVID, because then the usual space where a child would be kept busy going to school was not there. The parents, while they're supposed to appreciate the children are back home and we engage them, even while we were home, we saw violence increase in families. We thought people usually miss each other. That's why there's not enough love. Apparently, love at home is better when people are away. So we saw violence. And so even the safest space is not safe for children. I think you saw the president react to it by commissioning a study on this by the National Crime Research Center. It's available. You can access it. It's not telling any good news, unfortunately. I think what we have to is to rethink about the space of parenting and family, skillful parenting. I'm happy that people like Eveyln who are reaching out to parents. I think it is time where the government has to put in resources and actually require that parents are supported to understand the risks that surround their children. And they should not think Facebook ni vitu ya watoto, because if you do not know that space, how can you guide people? Can you imagine you've never walked around your community and you do not know the risky corners? How will you ever guide them? So briefly, I will say these are some of the things that have happened. So COVID definitely has made it worse in terms of child protection. You had those stories of teenage pregnancy numbers that appear to be higher. Though when you look at the data, again, let me not tone down your alarm bells, but the truth is they weren't very different from the previous years. But still, even one pregnancy is one too many. So that's something we still need to address. Thank you for now.
Thank you, Sam, for that. And indeed, I like the fact that you have really helped us classify a child's life into 3 phases. And now this new phase, which is majorly brought by the cyberspace, availability of the internet and all that, and now time. Now I'm wondering, Eveyln, you've been doing this for quite a while, and I don't know whether you've seen any difference between what's happening during COVID time and before. Have you seen any changes or any new trends that we should be worrying about, or we should be able to take note?
Okay, that's a very good point to start. Thank you, Sam, for actually creating for us that environment and creating the picture that we need to start thinking about. I will not repeat anything you've said because there are certain things that I wanted to say, but you've already said them, which is good. So allow me to share my screen. I have a small presentation so that I'm able to just help us see a little bit of what I've been encountering as a practitioner in the field, as I train both parents and children. So I will not bore you with my I will share this presentation, so if you want to see my CV, just a brief of it, it's there. So let me just start by helping you look at the offline reality versus online reality. In 2018, 2019, there's a phrase that I used to use every time that I would start a conversation with people. And it was that there are many phones in a typical home in Kenya and generally Africa than there are toilets. When you think about your own typical home, think about how many gadgets how many phones especially and internet enabled gadgets you have versus the toilets you have in your own home. Then think about that in the larger African Kenyan context and then the African context. But the current reality is that as of last year, the reality is that now we have more data enabled gadgets in a typical home, yes, than there are toilets. But the flip is that now we are seeing these gadgets being handed down to children who are younger. Ideally we would have people who are maybe above 10 years old or probably above 13, people who are getting into their teenage age with probably a phone, a laptop, and probably like a computer. But COVID came, and when we were forced to go into some spaces for learning, when we were forced to socialize online, we found ourselves buying like independent gadgets for children who are even younger than 13. And we have 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds who have phones. If you have looked at a typical Kenyan mother, a hip Kenyan mother, they are normally breastfeeding when they have a phone on their face. So this child is already cultured from a very early age, even before they utter one single word, that the time for breastfeeding, the time for eating, they need to have a glare of a screen in front of them, which really is a danger, because weaning them off that space is quite a challenge. And when I'm helping parents, try and see how this space, getting children out of the addiction of even just the screen glare, it's normally quite the challenge. So what we do ideally is to just equip, especially the children, to have digital literacy skills and online safety tools and skills that they can apply, because the reality also is on the ground that you and I, who are parents seated here, we are not with our children all the time. We have been told by Samuel that, there are spaces where our children occupy, and unfortunately, unless we are home with them or physically with them, they are spaces where our children occupy without us. And we would want to be able, you want to be the parent who has a child making decisions on themselves, knowing that I will serve the responsibility for whatever, and especially things like posting, things they watch online, they will be the people who take full responsibility for that. So let me just paint a picture, because I've been asked what has changed, and just allow me to let you know that on the 27th of November 2018, Google launched the Family Link app in Africa. What that meant is children below the age of 13 are able now to have an email account. Yes, it is mapped through a parent's account, but the idea of a child having their own independent email address, it was possible for us in Africa when this Google Family Link was launched. And out of this, your children are able to have YouTube, they're able to access email, they're able to access a few applications that are provided by Google, which is an advantage, because come COVID, when COVID happened, then at least our children were able to interact with the different learning platforms through their own emails, and not congesting our own personal emails as we would do it previously before COVID happened. On the 11th of June 2020, I participated personally in the awareness of the Facebook Messenger for Kids, which was launched in Africa. And what this also meant, because they were reacting, Facebook was reacting to serve the social need that COVID had robbed us. Children are social beings. We are social beings as human beings. And the fact that we were under lockdown, our children are frustrated, they wouldn't be able to see their friends. So they created the Messenger for Kids, which again, as a parent, you're able to create that platform for your child connected to your Facebook account. But this was opening up the door for children to be able to access their friends socially through this platform. Just around 5 days ago, when I was doing my internet rounds, I saw that Facebook also said that it is planning to create a version of Instagram for children below the age of 13. Again, let me just stress the fact that this is a response to something that is happening in the market. Every time you see a product being launched, it is reacting towards a need that is being served in a market. And you can already see the fact that we have children having emails. Very many other platforms will start creating applications and platforms which can be accessed by children way below the age of 13. Remember that analogy, the statistics that I gave, just without even numbers, the fact that we have more phones or more internet-enabled gadgets in our homes than we have toilets. You can imagine who has these gadgets. And if your child has a gadget which is internet-enabled, and they want to be able to socialize with people they are not seeing, these are the spaces that will probably spend a lot of their time. Okay, so I want you to just take a minute and look at this photo. This is the COVID effects. We have been interacting with our grandparents online. We have forced our grandparents to become grandparents who are probably now digital, I don't know, dinosaurs or whatever. They have been forced to interact with us through video conferencing platforms. We have been seeing parents trying to work, holding a baby, you have your earphones on, and you're trying to work, you're trying to babysit, but you're babysitting your child also with a screen. We have actually also seen now children, especially siblings, even friends, who are playing. You can see some children, they're playing games underneath a blanket. I think this is a reality also in very many homes where they're hiding to play, but there's also a reality of children who are just playing in the open. But the common thing about all this is that there's an introduction to screens. And if you can see it clearly, especially in a form where there's a father seated on his tab, there's a child, and if you look at the back, there's a mother and a child as well on the dining table, also with the platform. This is very familiar for you and I. I know we have seen a lot of this, and it will only continue growing because the space of innovation, technology keeps evolving. This is something that I love to just let people look and ask yourself, is this my reality? Have I been here? And what does it actually mean? When I'm teaching parents on how to create conducive environments, and they ask me this one fundamental question: when is the best time to give a child a phone? And I tell them normally, there is no best time. You have to answer the why. Once you understand why that child needs a gadget, then you will be able to make a decision on when to provide that gadget for a child. But then I also add a caveat to it, and I ask these parents, when you're giving a child a phone, how will that gadget affect or impact the relationship that you have with your child? Because again, you have brought something that will probably be a distraction to very many family and physical face-to-face or human bonding. Yeah. So just look at this and tell me, just ask yourself, is this my reality? Have I been here? Am I here? Is it worse than it is? That is for you to answer. So Samuel has brought up something that we need as a society, as parents, to start talking about. I know in Africa, it kind of is a taboo, but these are two concerns that I have pulled from some of the groups that I interact with. I removed the names, obviously, because of privacy. But there is one parent who is concerned about any other parent like themselves dealing with children who are trans, lesbian, gay, or have any body dysmorphia. We do know, if you go on the internet, you will find different kind of influencers trying to push an agenda. If you have at least a Netflix account or a Showmax account, or you have a digital TV, you know that the kind of content being pushed, again, in our screens has a certain kind of agenda. It has a certain kind of notion where if we don't spend time with our children, or we don't sit down and watch what they're watching, somebody else somewhere who's curating content that is targeting our children is planting seeds in their heads. So you find that parents at a very early age are having children who are questioning, their gender, their sex, they're questioning their likes and stuff like that. So yes, this particular post generated at least 400 comments in less than an hour. Of course, past that, it kept growing and people kept having the conversation. But just in that 1 hour, there was so much interaction. And then again, there's another parent who posted this and said, "Good morning, everybody. I was on my child's phone and found a lot of gay porn on his phone. What should I do?" One of the things that I do know, as parents, we are not built to have great shock absorbers. So we will see some things and maybe you will react in such a way that might not be the best way of reaction. We do get our children watching funny stuff. We either confiscate their phones or we take away their screens, having not thinking through the fact that unfortunately you as a parent are not the only person within the ecosystem of your child that can give your child a phone or access to the internet. There are very many people within the ecosystem of the child. So as we were having this conversation, one of the things that I kept asking parents who are bringing in a number of issues and they were convincing other people what they should do and what they wouldn't do, I kept asking one fundamental question: who has access to your child? If you're not able to answer that question of who has access to your child, then every incident that comes, you will be putting out a fire and you will become that reactive parent who is always, trying to solve issues as opposed to trying to preempt things that you ultimately need to start talking about at an earlier age. All right. So those are the kind of things that are on the ground. So I wanted to just show you what is also happening across the world. Samuel also painted to us a picture that we all remember towards the end of last year. Cabin fever caught a lot of our children because them not being able to go outside and play and exhaust their energies. They were indulging in other spaces. You know, the online space became such a huge part of their being. And one of the things that also happened is we started seeing a lot of online grooming has been happening. But within the last 1 year, because children have been spending a lot of time online, there was such an influx of the numbers. There were so many platforms that were, you know, being flagged because of creating some of these avenues. So the Internet Watch Foundation actually noted, I will share this presentation so that the topic has the link. You can be able to open the link and read more of it. But criminals and pedophiles are trying to groom and exploit young children. This has always been the case. So the Internet Watch Foundation said victims ranged from 3 years, you can imagine a 3-year-old, all the way to 16 years, are some of the people who have been groomed by adults. And which spaces are these people presenting themselves? In video games. Your child might be playing a video game online, and they have introduced virtual players whom they do not know, some they do know. But our children sometimes, if they're not equipped to know how to interrogate the people they're playing with, they might be playing with somebody who is masquerading to be a child, but they're an adult in there trying to see how they can groom our children. Most parents also don't know that some of the games that we do buy have chat options. And there is a setting actually in most of these games for parents to block the chat options, because you want to be able to let your child play games, for instance, but play in a way that you can hear and you can see, and they're not going into hidden places to start talking to people in private, because this is where these pedophiles, they live. They start grooming our children. As parents, if you're not affirming your child, if you're not getting interested in what your child is doing, somebody else is going to do that job for you. Unfortunately, you cannot control the kind of conversations that will occur as your child is being groomed online, because every human being wants to be told either they're beautiful, they look nice, their hair looks good, and stuff like that. So when children don't get this kind of conversations at home, they start posting photos of themselves online so that they can get their affirmation from strangers. It is a very short dopamine hike that comes and goes as fast as as fast as they post it. But then it becomes such an addiction whereby they always want to post something so that somebody can say something nice to them. And the people who are grooming our children, unfortunately, these are the kind of things they're picking on. So this survey, it actually did present something very horrific also, that it found 511 examples, involving siblings between September and December. And this is right about the time where our children are really getting cabin fever and fatigue of just the lockdown. Unlike us, who had some coping mechanisms, our children really did not know how to cope with the lockdown. Yes, they would understand this COVID, but we are not giving them really an option, and parents have left them to their gadgets. So roughly 1 in 30 instances of all self-generated content in a time, children are posting photos of themselves. One of the things that I'm always telling them is that, one, when the internet never forgets, unfortunately, even if your parents were to see naked photos, for instance, of them online, yes, we will feel bad as parents, but guess who suffers the consequences of those naked photos online? It is their digital footprint that ultimately is being tainted on this internet space. So of course, we in the cyberspace here understand the value of encryptions. We understand the risks that we are presented to every single day with cyber hacking, identity theft, and stuff like that. So we understand how well we need to protect ourselves. But there are people also who are trying to use those same protections or the same gaps to be able to see how they can get into the spaces of our children. And things like now encryption, I know, and the people in the Justice Department here will say that some of these things are also making it very, very hard to get these people who are criminals or perpetrators of online abuse into book, because once there is encryption, there's so many data that gets lost, or the flow of data collection in terms of the abuse that children are going through online, it gets lost in between their hands. So again, I will share this so that you're able to just read in depth about what is happening across the world, so that at least as a parent or an educator or a guardian or a stakeholder, you're able to know what is happening in the world and where you should start stepping in and seeing how to protect children. So as a business, what do? We help people understand the ecosystem of the child. So the primary influencers who are parents and guardians, then where they go to school. For them, unlike you and I who used to play outside a lot, for them, their social life is going online. So that is their tertiary space. And then, of course, we have the influencers of government and global society who create policies and deploy the same. During the Safer Internet Day this year, which I'm happy to have participated in it, this website was launched. The link is at the bottom again. As I share this, you'll click so that you're able to go to this site. One of the things that this website has is a portal for parents and a portal for children. As a parent, I think being proactive means you sit down with your children and teach them on some of the things, some of the ills that are online, what they can do, what is the reporting channel, should you not be around, what can they do, because you want to be able to empower your child as much as possible. Talk about online bullying. The site has child-friendly content, child-friendly language that you can use so that at least you're able to see how you're able to start these conversations. Because if you don't start these conversations, again, I said, there might be somebody else who would do that conversation for you, but you might not be able to control how and what they tell your child. The national SAT that is under CA, they do have a hotline. I know they're working on getting a toll-free number so that at least the calls that people are making are free. However, they do have different ways that you can report. For children, look for the simplest way. If they're on Twitter, let them tweet. If they can use email, let them email. If they can go to the website portal, the easiest, simplest way that you can have your child report an incident that is happening to them online, so that at least the relevant bodies are able to take account of that. However, there is Childline Kenya that fortunately does have a toll-free number. I love this because it's 116. It's free. If your child is able to call, Childline Kenya will pick the call. They will register the incident, and then of course they will work in collaboration with CA and the people who need to be able to take care of your child in terms of the incidences that are going on with them online. They're able, of course, now the judiciary is able to be given the flow of the process. So utilize these tools because they are actually out there for you and I to use them. We might not be able to use 116, but let your child know in case of anything happening online, I can just press 116 on this gadget that I have, and somebody out there will help me if I am in distress. So also we have been teaching from a very long time, having physical classes, but of course due to COVID, we had to shift all our classes online. So we do have a class for children for digital literacy and online safety, which is a 12-session program. And then we do have a similar class for parents, educators, and guardians. For them here, it was to just help them create conducive environments for children. And then, of course, because we want our children, after they've learned how to be safe online, they know how to become a digital citizen. Well, they're online, let them not just use that space for entertainment and happy, I call them mindless games. Sometimes they can start utilizing the space to code. They can do meaningful things like create content and be busy with education or research and stuff like that. So we do offer a coding club for children because we believe that their future will be infused with technology. So we give them that opportunity to start exploring their minds. So this is just an example of what some of the children are doing in class. And I think my time is up. I will hand it over back to you, and I'll wait for questions after the session.
Thank you so much. I was tempted to cut you off, but the content was very interesting, and I felt like the participants must also be enjoying. And I think my takeout from this is just understanding why we need to give a gadget to our kids. Maybe if you first ask yourself that, then some of the problems you might be able to solve before they even mature. And to our last presenter, Honorable Mary, I'm wondering, due to COVID, of course, also looking at what Eveyln has presented on the new trends that we are seeing, do these actually reflect on your end concerning the cases that you've handled?
Thank you so much, Catherine. To begin with, I will agree entirely with what Samuel and Eveyln have presented. on the effects of COVID vis-a-vis our children. Indeed, it reflects on the work we do at the judiciary. And as I stated at the beginning, that we have 3 categories of children that we deal with at the Children's Court. These are child offenders, and we have child victims who are witnesses and who also appear as children being in need of protection and care. We also have children who come to have the rights adjudicated upon by the court. These are children where the parents have issues, marital disputes, and we have to address issues of custody, issues of maintenance. So I would say that we have observed new trends during the COVID period in respect of matters relating to child offenders. What I will say that we have initially, generally under the Children's Act, we have procedural rights and substantive rights of these children. When COVID came, as a judiciary, measures were put in place to ensure that these children were protected. And what the judiciary did or directed at the time was that we get as much as possible child offenders from the detention centers. We also reintegrated most of the children who were in CCIs back to their families. We also limited admission of child offenders into detention, detention facilities. We also, of course, introduced the use of ICT in our court proceedings. And with all these measures, the question that I ask myself is whether at the end of the day, we were protecting or exposing the children. Now, in terms of trends of the crimes we have seen against our children, we have seen increased case numbers on cases of child trafficking. Of course, this is due to the fact that most of the offenders took advantage of the fact that most of our children were exposed to technology. We have also seen increased incidences of children being exposed to child pornography. As Samuel said, we have seen increased cases of cases relating to dispute on child custody. We have seen increased cases on sexual violence on children, increased cases in child labor. We have seen increased cases of children going back to the streets. And this is for the reasons, like I said, that when COVID came in, we reintegrated most of the children back to their homes. And these were children that had been committed for one reason or the other. And when we were releasing these children, basically it was an abrupt process. We did not take into account that, or we did not do a lot of research to find out whether the children we were releasing will fit back to the society. And that's why we have seen so many children getting back to the streets. We have seen many of these children being subjected to child labor. And we exposed these children as well to instances of sexual exploitation by people who we expected that we hoped that they will take care of them. In addressing the issues Samuel raised, that due to COVID, we had so many instances of families having disputes between themselves. Indeed, as a children's court, we have seen an increased number of custody disputes, custody and maintenance disputes, and in the court. And there are several issues that we have observed that have come up during this period of COVID. For example, we have seen lots of issues relating to parental alienation. And this means that one parent is trying to pull the child towards their side as opposed to the other side. And this has, in my view, has been brought a lot because of the during COVID. We appreciate the fact that one parent maybe lost their job, the other one did not lose their job. And therefore, the children we have now are not the children we had maybe 10 years ago. These are children that prefer where they will get more leisure than where they will not get this leisure. So what we are observing is that most of the parents are taking advantage either of their financial situations to expose these children to an environment that is not conducive either to their age or conducive to their upbringing. I'll give an example that, for example, where one parent lost a job and therefore they are not able to provide these basics, including the basics that a child in an urban setup will require. And one parent is able to expose or to give such a child such an environment. So when we have such a dispute in court, when you call a child before court to hear their view as the law requires, then you'll find such a child will lean towards a parent who has the ability to provide for them these facilities that they require. For example, like we said, many of these children will prefer a home where there is a big screen. They will prefer a home where they will find a laptop. They will prefer a parent who can give them a phone for purposes of social interaction. And therefore, when they come to court, they will say, I want to stay with my father for the reasons that I am able to watch the TV throughout the day. I'm able to have a phone to communicate with my friends. I'm able to have a laptop to access the many entertainment sites. And this, in my view, is an issue that we really need to address as a society or as persons dealing with children, such kind of children. Again, on this group of children, what we have again observed is that parents again are exposing these children to internet a lot, for the reasons that when they come to court to address an issue of dispute or custody, before we had COVID, it was easier to give a parent physical access. It was easier to give a parent access in a public place. But currently with COVID, while we try as much as possible to protect such children, you find that the only alternative that is available is now the virtual access. Virtual access is where a parent then is able to access the child either through the phone, maybe through the Skype or other ways of accessing through the internet. And parents, either ignorantly or without knowing, will not want to have such access supervised. They will insist that I want to buy my child a phone and not to use either parent's phone for purposes of access. And they will not want it supervised. They will insist that they only want to access their child through the phone they have bought. They want to access the child either through the laptop they have provided. And this for us becomes a challenge because eventually now issues will arise that the child, while using this phone that a parent bought them, has been exposed to sites that are not conducive to the age of the child, has been exposed to an environment that is generally does not serve their best interest. But these are issues that are alive in the court that we face on a daily basis because physical access of a parent who does not have custody during this COVID period is almost impossible. During COVID, again, as I said, judiciary put in place several measures. One of them was to ensure that child offenders are not committed to detention centers. And this we have tried as much as possible to ensure that these children are not committed, even in a CCI, because of course there's a government policy that is encouraging raising a child within a family unit. And therefore, with this directive, we have found that many of these children are now going back to the streets to borrow alms for the reasons that when we reintegrate them, we do not have follow-up mechanisms to see whether they have settled back to where they were reintegrated into, and and follow up and see how they are doing. As a judiciary, we have limited resources in that respect, and therefore, while reintegrating these children, you find that you keep on finding them going back through the process, the criminal justice system. Like Samuel said, we have seen increased number of cases in sexual violence against children. The challenge that we have is that initially, before COVID, what we did, we used to protect the child witnesses in terms of ensuring that they are able to testify before we release the perpetrators back to the society. But now with the current situation, you find that you have to release an offender because now our stakeholder institutions are not allowing admission of new offenders into the institution. And this has affected the flow of cases and even how the cases are being managed. Management of such cases has been slowed down for the reasons that once you release the offender, once you release the victim, most of them, you find that they relocate to other regions. Then it becomes very difficult to process the case as quickly as possible as the law requires. With the use of the virtual courts, our observation and feeling is that we may be contravening the provisions of the law in respect of protecting the identity of children. Like we know, the virtual courts are open to anyone. The virtual courts are generally not camera proceedings. And therefore, these proceedings, you'll find that what a child's rights and identity are not protected as law requires. But, and therefore, this is an area as we need to look into in the circumstances we are living in on how we can address this particular issue. Because you find that even during these proceedings, children are part of those proceedings. As much as you try to protect them, you keep on finding that children are still made part of the proceedings. And this mostly is for the reasons that you find parents would want to come with the children in court just to make a point, to use the children, either to persuade the court to get an order. And therefore it becomes very difficult as a court to protect such a child through the cyberspace we are living in through the virtual courts. So generally, I will say with COVID and with the measures we put in place, they have exposed children more than protecting these children. And we need to relook at how we deal with the children during this COVID period, so that we protect their rights as provided for under the law. That is the survival rights, the protection rights, and their participation rights. So that is it for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mary, for taking us through what it is like in court, especially with the COVID around and the kids being home for a longer time, having plenty of time and plenty of devices too. So the participants, please, you can start asking your questions now that we have had all our presenters presenting. So I can actually see a question. So Mary, before you go, maybe you might want to take this up. Kevin asks, what are the privacy actions taken to protect children during normal court proceedings?
Thank you so much, Kevin. In all factors being equal, the Children Act provides that there are a category of children that you need to protect. These are victims of sexual offenses, children, especially children witnesses. Generally, you need to protect them, and the measures that we have in place are camera proceedings. That is, you exclude any other person who is not party to that matter and proceed in the absence of any other party. We have other protective measures, especially where a child is a witness. We have witness boxes in courts. If a child is not able to testify in an open court, we use such witness boxes. Again, in proceedings relating to children, we do not use the names of the children as they are. We use initials in terms of course listing these matters. In terms of filing, we do not use the real names of the children. This, in essence, is to protect the children, because court files are public files, and therefore anyone will peruse such files. So we use initials to protect the identity of the children. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. I hope, Kevin, you are well answered. Our Vice Chair has asked, this still is to you, Mary, how are our courts keeping pace with the technology for easier and faster access to justice for cases related to children and online offenders? Thank you, Frederick, for the question.
Sorry, Catherine, I didn't get the first part. Please come back again.
Okay, the question reads, how are our courts keeping pace with the technology for easier and faster access to justice for cases related to children and online offenders? Keeping pace with technology.
All right, keeping pace in terms of hearing of the cases, if I got the question right?
He's asking how the courts are keeping pace with the technology for easier and faster access to justice.
Yes, like I said, yes. Like I said, yes. One of the measures that the courts put in place when COVID came in was to introduce the virtual courts. These virtual courts have been in place since COVID came in. We have been proceeding through the virtual courts. We still have open courts, open court hearings. However, like I said, virtual courts are still it's new technology. We still have challenges because, like I said, some of the offenders were not released from the detention centers. And therefore, it means that we have to proceed when they are in detention centers. They are not brought to court. One of the challenges that we have had is that these facilities have limited facilities in terms of technology. And therefore you find then we keep on postponing these matters, but we have tried as much as possible to ensure that most of these offenders are able to access technology. We have customer care desks at the judiciary for persons who cannot access technology wherever they are. They are assisted by the judiciary to access. We still have open court hearings, but of course limiting the numbers. We have still been able to proceed with these cases with an effort of fast-tracking these cases, but I'll say that we may not have achieved much during this COVID period, but we have done a considerable amount of work in terms of hearing and disposing of cases during this period.
Maybe Catherine, I could add some thoughts to that question. I think there's been, over the last about 3-4 years, a digitization process that has been ongoing on in the entire judicial system. And at the beginning of this call, I did indicate that through the National Council for Administration of Justice, there is a development of the Juvenile Justice Information Management System. You appreciate that delivering justice to a child does not just start in the courtroom. It starts with the police system, with the prosecutors. And one of the weak points has been that this process of, having papers from every place can sometimes be a bit challenging. System that has been developed while it's still at pilot phase will enable the court to know well in advance how many cases are being handled, and also be able to link some of these cases to other services, because again, justice is not just about punitive. It's not about. It's also about enabling people to access certain things like social protection services. So that system will enable linkage to other information management systems that links these children and families to other support systems. Thank you.
Thank you, Samuel. There is a question directed to you, Eveyln. Someone asks, how would you explain child pornography matters?
To a child or to an adult? I'm assuming to a child, right?
Let's do both. Because it's an open-ended question. So how would you explain it to a child and then to the caregiver, this case the parent?
Okay, let me attempt to answer the one for the child, because that one is something I do a lot. So depending on the age of the child, I do encourage parents to start talking about sex, having the sex conversation with children as early as possible. If you have a child under the age of 7, the best way you can do it is sing songs. Sing songs about your private parts, because for them their life is all about singing, and when you're bathing them, you're showing them their private parts, naming them, not saying private parts. You're naming and you're telling them that as you're singing a song, nobody should touch them. If somebody is supposed to touch you, you can scream, you can bite, you can run, you can kick. When they're at that age, the best way I've found, and especially I do this with my daughter, is that we sing. We create songs and stories and stuff like that. As your child progresses, there will be instances where maybe they will see some things on the TV, they will ask. One of the things I keep telling parents is when your child asks you a question that is sexual in nature, just let your face get the memo not to get shocked. Try as much as possible to seek understanding from your child, because you want to be able to know how to answer that child in a way that will not confuse them. So try and ask leading questions like, what did you understand from what you saw? What were you doing when you saw, if it is pornography or stuff like that? You'll realize sometimes we panic and then we tell children things that they should not be hearing, or we try and complicate a situation that should not be complicated. But as much as possible, try and seek understanding from their side, and then use language that is not adult in nature. And don't, I think we as parents need to learn how to communicate with our children. Sorry, I think I was on mute. Did I mute or somebody muted me? I think, I'm sorry. So I was saying we need to learn as parents how not to complicate our words when we're communicating with children. Let them tell you what they understood, and then if for sure you don't have an answer, saying I don't know is still okay. As parents, I think we also don't know how to tell our children we don't know everything. So it is okay to say you do not know. You can go and seek help from somewhere else. If you need to go and absorb the shock, it is okay for you to go and absorb the shock instead of making a situation worse. But anytime conversations about pornography come, always try and look for the smoke, the fire. Don't just put out the fire and then leave it. There was smoke somewhere. Try and fish out. As a parent, I keep telling people all the time, don't tell your children stop, because the minute you say stop, it is the one thing they want to do. Learn to use language that is going to feed you information. For instance, your child comes and tells you, I saw porn, and then you ask them, what does porn mean to you? So that you're trying to understand what it is they saw, and you're trying to paint a picture. What were you doing when you were watching? Where were you? And stuff like that. But I think for us, we keep saying, those are not things you're supposed to watch. Those are they're bad things. We use some terminologies that confuse children. I have been in a situation where a 15-year-old girl told me, I said once, very early in my trainings, that sex is bad. And then, she asked me, teacher, does it mean that you people do bad things because adults have sex? So I learned that I have to be very careful with language, because as opposed to telling them sex is bad, I can use a statement like it is not age appropriate, because there's a point where it will be appropriate for them to have sex and they will understand it. So we need to learn how to use proper language. But for me, I keep telling parents all the time, if it is not a topic, you have to start being comfortable with that topic, but don't engage that conversation if you're not ready to engage it. It is okay for you to tell your child to give you a minute, go and absorb the shock. If you found them watching porn, it is okay for you to just step away, take the computer, but use a lot of your emotional intelligence at that particular moment, not to make that situation worse. I hope that answers that question.
Thank you, Eveyln. And before I let you go, there is also another question directed to you. Someone asks, how much have stakeholders collaborated to fight the vice through a team approach, and has government provided necessary support?
Government is providing support. I think as a society, we are very impatient. Our government, any government, not just our government, things are done with procedure and processes, and those processes might look very slow to you and I, because sometimes we have become this generation of microwave. We want things to be as speedy as possible, and sometimes the government is not able to give us solutions as fast as we would want. Hence why Kenyans are quoted to be bullies on Twitter, because when we feel frustrated with the pace the government is using to sort some issues, we take our frustrations on Twitter, we make noise. Unfortunately, we are not helping the situation. The government is helping. There's a lot that can be done, and that's why they partner with stakeholders, people like us who are creating awareness, who are teaching, so that we can tell, we can give the information that parents need. One of the examples that I gave is that there's a website that was launched in collaboration with Safaricom and all telcos. The telcos that are there are very many partners on that website. Somebody is able to just go to the partners website, the partners page, and see all the partners who are included in child online protection. You can pick any. All these people have the same message. The KESAT actually tries as much as possible to push information online, in the sense of telling people these are the avenues you can use to report cases. And once the cases are reported, I think as Kenyans, we normally want to see things again being done fast. But there's a process. I know Mary can attest that there's definitely a process that the government has to undertake, and the government has to collaborate with the different institutions, so that if it is a child abuse case, from the police, from the DCI to the judiciary to certain stakeholders, all in the government, but they're working together. But I can assure you, different people in different departments in government are collaborating. If you have seen KFCB in most of their announcements, right now they're curbing, trying to tell creators of content to make sure that any content that they are producing has to be appropriate for children. And people have been actually made to buy licenses so that some of these procedures can be followed. But what do we do as Kenyans? We start saying that, oh, this person is trying to kill artistic content and stuff like that. People forget that one day you'll have a child who you need to protect from the same people who are creating dirty content online. So I do believe that if you look carefully at the regulators in the space of online protection, you will realize that there is a lot of work being done. But I do acknowledge that there is more that needs to be done. And because of COVID, obviously, some of these steps are being heightened in terms of even showing what the government is doing. So there is so much being done in government by different stakeholders.
Thank you so much, Eveyln. I don't know if the other presenters have something else to add, especially on the collaboration bit.
Yeah, thanks. I think that question could also be hopefully asking for what can I do from the other person who is listening. And I just want to give you opportunity. So number one, like Eveyln says, there are a number of collaborative initiatives, and there's good leadership already from the Communication Authority of Kenya. There's what we call a National Technical Working Group on online safety, which has been operational. And now we do have a national strategy on promoting child online protection. I know it's in a draft stage. There are a number of stakeholders, including the Department for Children's Services, UNICEF, a number of local and private sector. There are documents or tools that have been developed. I know, like organizations, we work together with Childline Kenya, Teredizom, and also with Kenya Institute for Curriculum Development. And there is a training manual that is free. And what we're inviting people is use that, go into the chamas, go into your neighborhood assemblies, and train people using that. There are manuals that can be used at school. There are those that can be used in the community, so that there is a structured way in which then we provide this information. Again, they're not static, because this is one space that is changing very fast. So we look forward to your feedback on what reactions are you finding from the young people? What gaps in information are there? There are videos that have been developed that you can play for free. I will share maybe a few links here. They were sort of, I'm missing the word. When you use cartoon-like kind of, presentations that are much more connecting, and they're in episodes. I'll give you one or two examples. So feel free to use these resources. You don't have to keep creating new ones. Go into these platforms and you will find them. And of course, you can always add to make them better. Thank you.
And also, just to add, there is also a task force on children matters, that is the National Council on Administrative of Justice, that has a whole secretariat that addresses any concern, any policy issue regarding any aspects relating to the rights of the child, child justice. And therefore, if there is any issue, they are open to taking any concerns, and they will definitely address it, because it's a task force that has the membership is drawn from all the stakeholders, government and civil society, dealing with matters children, and therefore any issues that will reach their desk will definitely be addressed.
Catherine, let me just, I remembered something I forgot, that last year we got a new data commissioner. And I think, the carelessness at which we have been seeing with Kenyans, sharing content about children in different WhatsApp platforms and Facebook platforms, and giving their, people give their views about issues relating to children. It is important also for the people, seated here in your own jurisdictions, try and familiarize yourself with the data bill because the commissioner now is in office, and a lot of people are also finding themselves in very tricky situations where maybe your platform is a WhatsApp group has been perpetrating some content, and then you find yourself as a subject of investigation and you have no idea how you got yourself in there. Trying to understand that issues relating to children, issues relating to investigations, I keep telling parents that you should treat any child out there the way you would treat your own, and you should always have the best interest of the child at heart. Yes, we are normally saddened when we see a lot of stories that will come up, children being raped or children being abused and stuff like that. But we always forget that despite the act, we need to protect that child. So we act out of a lot of carelessness, and sometimes it's out of lack of understanding. But these resources are actually available to us. We have made it a conscious decision to use our website to put every law that pertains a child in the legal resources. So we have put the Children's Act, all the cyber security acts and bills that are available for people to read, so that you don't get yourself and start saying, oh, I wish I knew, I didn't know this happened. So we need to also be a bit proactive into seeing what the government is actually doing and what provisions are out there, so that we don't land into problems. Yeah.
Thank you,
Sorry, Catherine,
Eveyln.
can I add something again?
Please do.
Again, in addition, currently under the National Council for Children's Services, there's a care reform committee that is working out strategies to ensure that children remain families and are protected within the families. The committee that is working on modalities of ensuring that that will get us back to where we were many years ago, that the child belongs to the community and not to an individual parent. This is a community that is trying to encourage everyone to take responsibility as a parent to any child. And therefore, they're encouraging other ways of bringing up children in a society. They're encouraging adoption, they're encouraging guardianship, they're encouraging foster parenting, they're encouraging kinship upbringing of children in the society. And this will help us address these issues of children who are in need of care and protection, most of whom are exposed to these challenges of the current society. And therefore, clearly the government is doing something about the children in the current situation.
Thank you, Mary. And just before you go, Christine is wondering, how about we make these virtual court sessions accessible to only the parties involved, where you send the virtual link to of the court session to the parties and not making it accessible to the public?
Well, indeed, it's a possibility. It's something we have considered. It's something that we have tried. But the challenge is that when people are logging in the virtual court, you may not know in which case they are logging in, because sometimes they will log in with their names. Some will log in with the names of their gadgets. So it will be very difficult to know that they are in this particular case until you call it out. And calling out, on a daily basis, you have a course list. You not start in the middle. You have to start on the at the beginning. And by the time you realize that this person was not in the first case, or they were not in the second case, the damage will already have been done. So for the virtual court, it's very difficult to exclude someone from the proceedings until when they introduce themselves to the virtual proceedings.
Thank you, Mary. I think that's still something that you can still work on, with time, and then we ensure that we have the participants comfortable, because I'm imagining witnesses and all that. So there's a question to you, Eveyln and Samuel, on policies and laws regarding children. Do you think we should relook them, especially after COVID-19 and all these challenges that we've seen?
Yes, some provisions, not entirely everything, but there are some provisions, obviously, that are being upgraded on a needs basis, because also the process of amending policy is not a short one. It needs several sittings, it needs a lot of stakeholders, but there are emergency, or let me call them emergency rules or provisions that are put to hold certain situations. But yes, I know there are certain laws that are just being amended in certain areas to just maybe either make it a bit more specific in terms of the provisions they give, or to make it a bit wide to cater for a larger space. Because when you talk about issues, or when you talk about issues in the cyberspace, the cyberspace indeed is a very big space. It's just like how Kenyans right now are battling with the digital tax, and this word digital tax, it is becoming, people are using different methodologies and terminations for it. So I do believe, yes, that some of the things need to be upgraded, but I know some of the cases are being worked on, and especially with the Children's Act, there was an amendment that was done, I think, in 2017, if I'm not wrong, 2018, on some specific spaces, which included now the cyberspace. But even with what has happened during the COVID season, I do believe that there's room for improvement. And of course, because technology is also always evolving, these are the things that will keep changing as things progress. Samuel, please add on to that.
Yeah. You're right that the most comprehensive revision so far is in the Children Bill, which just got into Parliament, I think, in late February. So it's going into public participation very soon, and you'll have an opportunity to give input. But for sure, the law that we have, which was 2002 law, 2001 rather, did not have words like grooming. Such things did not exist then. So for sure, you want to make it possible to make such clear things that can be presented before the court, and with clear guidance from the law. But this law, of course, has to be read alongside the other laws, like the data protection issues, and the other laws on cybersecurity that are emerging. So I think there's a lot of room for that. But at the same time, I doubt whether you can fully legislate everything, considering that even the forms of violence that are happening on the cyberspace keep really transforming very fast. So I think there are certain principles that you can legislate. For example, that there must be the best interest of the children, there must be protection and all that. But there are things then that, as long as they are clearly defined in those principles, then they should be able to work. And before I leave that space of law, when we did a number of research and training programs, especially between 2018 and 2020, one thing that became very obvious is you can never police enough the cyberspace. There's never going to be enough people watching over it. And I'm one of those who strongly believe that the best you can do is empower your children, so that when they make decisions, when they finally find themselves in that space alone, they will be able to make decisions that are protective for them, even when you are not there. So while there's all that investment in the law, I think the part that is really missing is the investment in knowledge and capacity building for communities, parents, teachers, people who are really the immediate space of protecting children, and the children themselves is really, really much critical. And no government can do that. Parents must take responsibility. Thank you.
Also, I think, let me just add, anytime you're on the internet, you're a global citizen. you cease to just be a Kenyan citizen, but you're a global citizen. So it is also important to familiarize ourselves with the global policies on cybersecurity and child online safety. And among the things that I do encourage people to go through is the GDPR, because it has a lot of things that do affect our very, very direct usage of the internet. If you're able to explain to your children what digital footprint can cause in terms of their usage of the internet, I think it is important also to articulate it for their consumption, which I think is something also parents need to do. As Samuel said, I think there is no way you can say you do not know Facebook, because it's not a space you're in, but the children are there, so you cannot give what you don't know. So even with the laws that are out there, global, local, you need to be able to familiarize yourself so that you're able to guide your children from a point of knowledge. So that's what I would add.
Thank you so much, Eveyln. So I see there are no more questions on the chat. So let me give this privilege to one person to unmute their mic and ask a question, a short one. Could be a question or a comment before we let the presenters have their parting shots. Looks like there's no one who wants to grab this chance. So if there's none, then I'll go back to our able presenters. Thank you so much for these engaging conversations. You have really made this topic really enough, and would like to have you next time. And so we want to hear your parting shots, like what are you leaving it for us? What is in it for us here?
We were waiting for some guidance on the order, but now that I have the mic, I could begin. Well, my parting shot is, I think, like someone asked, is there any collaborative initiatives that are being done? For sure, like we've always said, a child is brought up by the village. And this is the village where the courtroom is here, the Kenya Association of, persons dealing with online safety and security, people like me who are working on, so that we have to keep talking to one another, and no need perhaps to keep reinventing the same resources. I think as I see a gap in our country where we keep developing new things, completely ignoring what exists. So a little of research, join into these networks that exist, and so that then we can invest in our children. There's nothing better than doing this, because a country is as good as the investment it does on its children. Thank you.
Mary, do you want to go?
All right. So I will echo Samuel's sentiments as well, that the child we have now is not the child we had 10 years ago. The society has changed a lot. And as parents, we need to also move with speed that the society and the environment we live in is changing. And we must put at the back of our minds that an innocent move by a parent can cost a child their lifetime. And therefore, I would encourage parents and the participants here today to take an initiative to create awareness about this issue, the cyberspace and the cyber crime that is an issue that is alive, so that we fight this issue for the betterment of our children. Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. For me, I think what I'll say is be the change you want to see. Start from your family. I keep saying, if you want to see some change in the world, you have to be the change that you want to see. Start from home as you escalate it, because the people at home are the people who you have best interest at heart. You wake up in the morning to go fend for your family. When they're sick, you will be uncomfortable and disrupted because of ailment and stuff like that. And you want to be the parent who creates a conducive environment for your children to always come to you when they are experiencing happiness online, when they're experiencing challenges online. Because again, you should be the person who's reassuring them that you have their best interest at heart. So for the parents who keep saying that technology is not my space, please make it your space. Start by asking your children what they love about the internet and get interested and get involved, because you want to come from a place of understanding, and you also want them to teach you the nuances of what technology has to bring. So start from being the change you want to see, but start from home. Thank you.
Thank you so much, our presenters. We now hand over to our chairman, Mr. Keniz, to pick up from there.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm seeing a hand from Timothy Mayaka, but before I would say something to close it, let's Honorable Catherine Kendago acknowledge our members, and then I'll give it a parting shot. Honorable Kendago, are you on?
Thank you very much. On behalf of the association, I salute the team of experts that we had today. That was quite a very loaded conversation. I think we live here richer in terms of our approach, in terms of the protection of children when it comes to the issue of the access to the internet. And just as when we started, the main issue was what is the approach? Do we look at it more of an individual that I am a parent to my child and my only concern is about my child? And from the conversations that we have had, I think we all carry on that we are ambassadors. We are going to invest and see that whatever we do in our different areas as partners in the justice system, we're going to improve and just make it better for our children. As Samuel said, it's not very easy and we cannot legislate on everything. I see the president has also given her comment. She had logged in, but she had requested that we allow her to participate as a participant. So on behalf of the association, I thank the association, and I also thank the experts that we had today and the membership that has also been drawn very widely. I see our judges who are logged in. Thank you very much for finding time to join us. And back to you, Chair. We are looking forward to the next team as we move forward on the issue of cyber security. Thank you very much for all those who logged in. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. I have nothing much to say. You can see I wasn't seated with my young one, trying to make sense of all this. But truth be told, a lot has happened.
Chair, I see you are Kenyan there.
Yeah, and I would want him to know much of this. But the most important thing, I was in some session last, I think 2 days ago, and one of the presenters said something which I like to reiterate here, that people are looking for things which are resource driven, things which will add value to them, not things that are going to take cost from them. And to say at the moment, children are with us. Are they going to add cost to us? Are they going to be something that add some source into us? And I believe with the right approach, now that we have Eveyln now, passionately speaking of this, we've had Justice, Honorable Mary also telling us what is the situation in the courtroom. We've also had from Samuel giving us the practical perspective of what really this has to happen, what really needs to happen. Guys, we can only do this by actually actualizing this. Thank you so much, our members who have attended, and everybody who has had time to attend this. May the God bless you until we meet again next time. And I think, Catherine, over to you now. Catherine? Hello, Catherine? Okay, I think we can now leave at our own pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chair, and
Thank
thank you
you.
to all of you. Have a good night.
And bye, everyone. All the best, and God bless you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Thank you, Candice, for everything, Munyinyuin, and all the presenters. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.